Welcome to the Mindset Michele TV show. I'm so excited to have you joining us again today. And I'm so super excited for today's guest, Lisa Sisson. Hello, Lisa. How are you going?
Hey, Michele. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's so fabulous having you on the show. And for those of you that aren't aware who Lisa is the CEO and founder of Unearth. And she's spent many years, many decades, in fact, even though she doesn't look like she has many decades, she actually has a number of decades of experience in the risk space, specializing in, insider threat, human behavior, cyber, which is a big topical thing throughout the whole world at the moment, and many other areas that I'm sure not all of us are aware of around the word risk. We might just think of, falling over as we cross the street as a risk, or driving a car. But I'm so fascinated and interested in how does somebody become a risk expert? So Lisa, please share with us a little bit more about how you became the fabulous you.
Thank you, Michele, for having me. It's lovely to be here. And falling into risk, as you've sort of mentioned, it's not something you kind of aspire to want to be when you're a kid, right? I don't think I would have even had that on my radar, or even a consideration it was a job. So yeah, it's not something you tend to grow up thinking, not like, we've talked about being a fireman maybe, or, going in and working in some sort of emergency services where the action is perceived to be seen, or working in defense or something like that. So no, when I grew up as a kid, my life was very different. So I think, well, first I'll let you know, I actually grew up in New Zealand. So please don't hold that against me. I've actually spent over half my life now in Australia. I moved to Australia in my mid-20s. But as I grew up in New Zealand, which is a beautiful country to grow up in, without a doubt, I grew up in a very small sort of valley area, a low socioeconomic sort of area. And but my home life wasn't actually as safe as it should have been. So it wasn't as straightforward. I know my family did the best they could. And don't get me wrong, I had an amazing, loving mother that was there for me. But because I was a bit of a quirky kid, a shy kid, and an environment where it didn't feel so safe. So my confidence wasn't as probably as bold as what a lot of other children's would have been. And that actually made me a perfect target also at school for bullying. So I kind of had it tough on the home front and the school front for many years. And anyone who's sort of been through that sort of experience, I'm sure can relate. I grew up in a time where bullying it definitely wasn't through cyber. Excuse me, we didn't have cyber then, but it was very much physical. It's definitely emotional. And so as I sort of grew up, I had to learn, one, to understand human behavior. I had to become super aware of what kind of things triggered people, but also I had to learn how to protect myself. And that wasn't something that took me a while to get to that point in that journey. And so I did learn how to protect myself, both physically and I'll say mentally and emotionally, though I think that was a bit of a rough journey in doing that, because of my understanding of self-worth, which is one of the challenges I think a lot of kids have when they grow up. But that whole stage of learning to defend myself actually then led for me to learn how to defend others, and understanding and having a fascination around human behavior. So it's always been an interest of mine since a young kid without realizing it. And then I kind of went off into the world, which was in a roundabout way, to try and find out who I was. Now, a lot of people go into the world and they know what they want to be when they grow up, right? Or go and have a career and start setting a course, maybe going through uni, getting a career. And it's pretty straight, a straight line. I'd say maybe a few deviations. And then there's people who go into the world who don't have the clear path. And sometimes life takes them on a journey and takes them in a roundabout way. But all the skills that they're learning are actually bringing them to a point to be able to then provide a different perspective or skills. And so mine was the latter sort of journey. I had no idea I was going to end up in the risk space when I started, outside of doing a lot of physical personal protection. Some people call bodyguard work very early on because of some of the skills that I had acquired, which was rare for a female to do, and very much a male-dominated area, I assure you. But even though that's maybe where I started, once I kind of met my husband, my career had to change a lot. So I went into the whole corporate space in different areas. I fell in love with technology. I fell in love with a range of other things and had some amazing experiences. But there were a couple of things that always stayed true to me. One, because of my connections around law enforcement, military, and things like that. People I used to train with when I was doing physical security were always close. And two, that my understanding around risk was also always there. So it helped me in all the roles that I did to understand human behavior and different things, but also I found myself always being drawn to those types of opportunities and roles, projects, and so forth. And so I've had an unusual perspective in relation to how I've seen the world, especially when I've looked at things like risk and opportunity, because of just my life experience, right? Just for what I've been through. And as a result of that, it also meant that when I started to look at things, I understood the importance of knowing that risk actually starts and ends with people, which you now know has become a bit of a tagline associated to me, including the name of my book. But really, it's been an unusual journey, but anyone who actually knows my full story, all the people have always said, I'm exactly where I need to be. So that gives you a little bit of insight. It's a little bit left field, a little bit right field, but it's definitely brought me to where I am today, which is why we're able to give a really succinct, clear approach to how we manage and help people to manage risk.
Wow, and I really just want to firstly acknowledge how well and how well you tell your story, and I appreciate that there's a lot more depth to the story, and I just really want to acknowledge firstly that as somebody with some lived experience as well, it's not always easy to tell your story and to tell it in a way of how it created the person you are today. So I really want to acknowledge how well you do that and how well you understand then the drivers around what you do. And I think, really acknowledging that need from an early age of understanding human drivers and human behaviour, because it's a physical safety kind of element, isn't really talked about enough. But I really want to just acknowledge how well you frame it and say it in a way that I think really empowers others to then be able to talk about it in a way that is a part of their origin story, and in a way also celebrates out of those experiences they've then become the amazing expert and fabulous person that they are today. So it celebrates that journey as well.
Yeah, I do believe that when people have had to live certain experiences, it makes them acutely aware without them even realizing some of the skills that they've obviously needed to learn. And so if there's ways in which that, through life's journey and as you mentioned, mine, it's a long one. So it's kind of like it's one that you need over a couple of glasses of wine or something like that. And I know we recently, last year we invested the time, actually it might even been the year before now, time's been flying past, and I think it was in 2020, we sat down as a team and went through the values of the business. And the best way we knew how to do that, to get to the core of what the values of the business was for me to share my story. So we did that. It was facilitated by some amazing people. It was a very vulnerable moment for myself because I'm not one to usually share a lot of it. It's kind of one of those things that a lot of people, it's kind of taboo to talk about for some people. But for me, it was just really personal, and I'm quite a personal person. But I decided that it was really important that we all understood what was really driving, underpins the business that we have today, which, our whole purpose is to create a safer world. And we do it, one workplace, one community at a time. And so it was really important for the team and the people we work with to know why. So I shared my story, and that's why I kind of mentioned that most people who hear it, and don't get me wrong, there were some tears that were welling up when we went through it, but out of respect for the amazing people I've had in my life, it was a great opportunity to share that. And then all our values that we share, even on our website, they aren't things that are banners. Those are things I personally live by, and the business is built up from. So they aren't labels, they're the depth.
Yeah, and I really get that. I hear that, and I sense that depth to living the talk, and that's the power of that authenticity. And I again want to just acknowledge how beautifully you role model that, sharing the story, sharing the values, and sharing that authenticity about, well, You have a very personal passion around your business and about what it does and the difference it can make. And I think that that's where it makes it interesting. And I'm sure people will be interested in, with that understanding of who you are and what the business and everything stands for, what then does success mean to you? What does success mean in that kind of construct?
So well, for me, it goes back to what I sort of shared around, what our mission is, which is to help create a safer world. So success for me is finding ways to help make that a reality. And yes, we do it one workplace, one community at a time. And I have obviously it's a big goal, right, to create a safer world, but it's all in the little things that we do day to day and the actions that we take. So, I work with kids as well and working around mentoring, where we create safe environments for them to learn to grow and do things. I do it with the Tech Girls Super competition, Super Tech Girls competition, and I love those sorts of things. So anything where we can show how do you create a safe environment, a safe workplace, where you can actually bring people together who have differences, different life story. Even as young kids, they have those. We definitely do as adults, but it's important to do it in a respectful manner so we can get the best out of people and put some very sensitive topics on the table, especially when you work in risk management, some very sensitive topics on the table, and allow people to be able to table them in a way and explore them in a way that is one that's safe, but also take them, especially when you talk about risk management being an area that makes most people feel quite anxious, vulnerable, they might even fear it, but we're able to show them that there's actually opportunity is the flip side of the whole risk coin, so risk and opportunity, two sides of the same coin. So it's that risk is a pathway to opportunity and often transformation. So that's what we're trying to create as part of that. What does success look like? I think it's to change that mindset, and that would probably be the outcome, that risk is a pathway to opportunity and transformation.
Fabulous. And I really hear in that it's also creating that space where it's safe to talk about the risk, because when it's framed as the risk can equal an opportunity, you can then kind of get around some of the resistance to talking about risk in the first place if it's framed in that way. And what a beautiful way. I keep coming back to the, creating a safer place for the workplaces and for the community. What a beautiful focus on success and intention for success that you and the organisation have. I also think people would be quite interested, because looking at risk in terms of risk and opportunities, it then means when we're talking about creating a successful mindset, many of the people that we have on the show, that they're talking about things that might be opportunities on that side of the scale. But I'd be interested also if you have, some of the risk areas around if you don't pay attention to this and if you don't pay attention to that, in terms of risk for not creating a successful mindset or a successful mindset intention, because, life has its ups and downs, but it's about that intention that you set for where you want to be going. So what sort of things do you share to create that successful mindset through your life and through your business?
Well, one is the importance of having that safe environment, but one of the things about risk and that I share a lot is that risk actually starts and ends with people, because risk is a human concept. We've created risk. There is no risk without people, right? It's something that we are determining the value of, something that we think is, important to us as a person or a group of people. And so because it's a human construct, you actually then need to embrace the fact that there's power in people to help you look at these situations or these decisions relating to risk, whether it's protecting a building or a person or a place, or there's exposure to them, or whatever it ends up being. In its simplest form, it comes back to decisions and actions, or in some cases even inactions, and it's around people. We make those decisions. We are the ones that are making the decisions and taking actions to get creative in how we might protect. So what I would probably say around mindset is realize the power of your people. Like, seriously realize the power of your people. If you look at people and all you see is employees, and you might even see them as being potentially at risk, because that's what tends to happen a lot for a lot of organizations when they're trying to manage their risk profile. They're looking for all the areas where people could make mistakes, it could be on the technology, it could be working in a factory, it could be lots of things where they see human error. And it's true, we as humans, we actually make mistakes. So we have to accept the fact that we're fallible, that this happens. It's not always intentional. Most mistakes are unintentional, right? But what we also know is there's a correlation between when people feel safe and protected and feel like the organization or the business is looking after their well-being, that when they feel that they are being treated with respect, treated with care, and that they are deemed of value, then they also are usually inclined to do the same in return. And that means they become more focused and engaged in the business, because disengagement is probably one of the biggest risks within an organization that we do not talk about enough. Most organizations think about disengagement as poor performance around productivity. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of quick facts around that. So when we talk about people in the workplace and we talk about disengagement, it actually falls under the umbrella of an insider threat. It's because of the errors that happened, and that's often where you find a lot of the insider threat incidences that get captured, whether it's through technology or other things that are used. That we know that 2/3 of insider threat incidences are actually unintentional. And there is a correlation, because when people don't feel valued and they don't feel connected to the business, they feel disengaged, right? Or some people get to the point of being actively disengaged, then their attention to detail, their attention to seeing where there's problems within the business, risks within the business, a threat within the business, tend to be more of the mindset of around, well, that's someone else's problem, right? That's, the business is looking after me, so why do I care? They really have that kind of mindset where they feel less effort, less inclined to want to protect the business. That it's just, they dismiss it in some ways because they don't feel that the business is supporting them. And one of the things that we often see around this is that, how do people go from being engaged and feeling, that they're connected to the business, to disengaged? Well, one of the areas that happens is that a lot of organizations and businesses and smaller companies even, their risk management approach or their risk management strategy is often in conflict to the organizational identity, which means all those values that you're pitching and saying, we empower our people and we believe in you, and you're bringing them into the business with this mindset of thinking, I'm coming in here to contribute, and they want me to really make a difference, and they come into the business, and suddenly all the operational aspects that you've got, that you're trying to manage risk to prevent the unintentional incidents that they may make, or to protect the people from themselves, some people say, that actually often impedes the ability for a lot of these employees to actually do their job, to do their fundamental role that you've given them KPIs against and asking them to do. And so when that happens and they can't do their job, two things happen. Often they feel like this gets too hard, they get worn down, become disengaged. And the second thing is, if they really feel like they're under pressure and there's a lot of stress associated to performing, then they'll often find workarounds, which also expose the organization. So this is where I say, there's power in your people. If you have engaged people, they can literally become your risk sensors and tell you ways to do things better for the organizations. And usually those things end up being better for your customers as well, because they're engaged, they're giving that whole flow through. I'm enjoying being here, they're listening to me. And so I'll actually just quickly use the example of Boeing many years ago was a great example.
Before we go into Boeing, because I'm just aware that we're going through a lot of different concepts, and to make sure that people are kind of picking up on the different concepts, because I really like to maybe pause and then just
break it down. Sorry.
So that, because I know that you're so super passionate, and it's wonderful to hear the passion. So if we look at it firstly in terms of, the disengagement, and I think, although the example you're using about is going into work and you're really gung-ho and engaged and enthusiastic, some of the operational constraints then lead to that disengagement. I think, the same can be said around relationships and other areas of life. So you so beautifully described it around an office environment, but I think the same is true where, in a sense, people's expectations or the realities mean that although you're passionate and want to be engaged and want to be involved and want to be included, in a relationship, if the other person controls all the banking account and you don't really have much of a say in it, you might start to get disengaged, whoever it might be. Or the same with, decisions about the children or whatever it might be with a friend, where you never get to choose the movie. Your friend always picks the movie that you go to. And I think that this is interesting in terms of that mindset of how do people then feel empowered again to actually say, and sticking with the work example, you asked me to come in and do this job and these are my suggestions for how to do it, but I can't change anything because the operational structure is in such a way that I can't actually change it. So I love how in that first space around, how do you then have the dialogues and how do you open the communication, going back to that risks and opportunities around, well, the risk is that if we don't have it structured in this way, the employees could make 20 times more mistakes, accidental mistakes. But if the risk is if we have it structured in that way, then their attention to detail, their motivation, their this, their that drops by 70%. So having that qualitative and quantitative data helps everybody to have those conversations and can help both sides kind of do that giving and taking. So I think that first element around that disengaging is, really important for people when they're thinking about their own mindset, to not just recognise that it might be that in your office or in your work environment, in a factory or wherever, that disengagement is, I've got no control, I've got those. It affects the whole of your life, and it affects your approach and your sense of empowerment and well-being in every aspect. So making it okay that it's just work or it's just this or it's just that is something that I would suggest, to look at, because every area gets infected. You're like a whole ecosystem, and everything in your ecosystem affects each other. So I think that that's a fabulous point around, that disengagement and that disconnection, whether it's from work or from life or from whatever it might be.
And agreed. And sorry, that I know I do get passionate sometimes when I go on my little rant. So what I was going to say also is that just a couple of things. One, always remember that people touch every aspect of your business, right? So they're making decisions and actions every day that either can do give opportunity or actually do harm. And the same thing is, and as you said, in life, when you've got people, everybody is part of a community. Everybody's part of a family, or even if they live on their own, they're at least part of a community. And so when you've got things going on within work where people become disengaged, you're actually changing their life's journey, their story, because they're carrying weight, pressure, and stresses that go along with it. And when people carrying extra stress, you're not going to get the best out of them in their job, and you're certainly not going to get the best out of them always in their life. And so there has to be these things to help offset that. And there needs to be positive things. And so I agree with you, the whole thing about people when it comes to engagement, whether it's in a family environment or within work, it's about connection. It's about feeling that connection. It's about feeling that they're contributing in life, regardless of which side, it's contributing in life. And that's meaningful to them based on their values and who they are as a human being. And really, if you think of, if people could show up wholeheartedly as the people that they are, and do jobs that they enjoy doing and feel passionate about it, could you imagine what the world could possibly look like? I think it could look a lot different than what it does today, for sure, especially if they felt like they're heard and can contribute in a safe way. I think there'd be a big difference.
And I think that this is one of those interesting factors around your second point, to do with they stop paying attention to detail, and so more and more mistakes happen because they're just not engaged. And I think that that's where the overall theme of what we're talking about here, about that collaboration and the cooperation, is something that, whether we're talking about risk or an organisational culture, it's really creating that safety around being able to have these conversations, and it's not always one is going to win or the other's going to win, or right or wrong, but it's moving into more of that collaborative space to have those conversations. I was even saying again this week that I'd been observing some what is called in the culture and change management space learned helplessness, and that a lot of that stems from what you're talking about, where people want to do things but they can't do things, and so they just learn not to be able to help themselves anymore. They just stop trying to change or fix situations. And I think again, if it happens in one area of your life, then people tend to give up in other areas of their lives, and this is where creating those dialogues, and I think, as I was saying at the beginning, the beautiful way that you framed and structured the topics that you were talking about, these are, it can be a risk and it can be challenging to have these conversations, but the importance of them is, can't be understated.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I find is that even on my personal journey, individually, as individuals, we are but a drop. If you bring people together as a collective, we can become an ocean and of knowledge, experience, and skills and ideas and ways to actually find better paths forward. And when you think about that, it is, I'll go back to the workspace just for a second, because there's just usually so many people around you that each play a role within an organization. And so if you think about that, you've got people who are closest to your customers, closest to the roles that they're doing. And if you're not listening to what it is they actually need, then are you really setting them up for success? Because that's real. And that then goes to the fact then, is the business being set up for success? Because if you're not thinking about those sorts of things, and that you've got the best of intentions because you're trying to go down that tick list to comply to all the things you need to around risk management, to be certified or whatever it may end up being, but you've got so distracted by the list that you've actually forgot the most important resources you have, which is your people, then, not only are you not actually managing the risk in your organization, because, when you look at things like insider threat and disengagement, they are some really significant risk. And so if your people aren't engaged, then you're never managing the risk. But the other flip side is that these people who have so much knowledge can contribute to what you need them to share in knowledge and insights about the best way to service customers, the best way to help your operations. They can actually be of great value. They can also take pride in that work. So then when they leave and go home, there's one part of their life that they are feeling like that they are connected to. And hopefully when they do go home, because of the positive influence you're having on their life, there's less stresses, so they go home, they can be more engaged there in a more positive way as well. I mean, that's an ideal world, but we at least want to try and give people that opportunity, right? So not wear them down at work, so when they go home, they've got less tolerance for the family. It would be great if they feel like they're contributing at their work, so when they go home, they can still have more meaningful conversations, because that's what they're accustomed to.
Yeah, and I think that's where when we were talking about that the intention around the risk and the opportunities and creating that positive mindset as this fabulous intention. So I know that there's so many more hours that we could talk about this, but how can people get hold of you and find out more about their own or their organisational community risk?
Yeah, well, absolutely, they can get hold of me either through LinkedIn, Lisa Sisson. There's not too many of us around, thank goodness. And the business being Unearth, or if you just want to check us out on the website, it's unearth.com.au. And you can absolutely connect through me through that as well. So, but yeah, keeping in mind that the work that we're doing really does come back to, it's the only person-centered approach to risk management out there.
There's only a couple of minutes left, sorry, Lisa, and I just wanted to say it's SISSON for people that are looking at Lisa on an LISA for Lisa. And if you were to give some advice to your younger self, what might that be?
The advice I'd probably give to my younger self is to know that you are loved, be courageous, and just be you, just show up wholeheartedly.
Beautiful. What absolutely fabulous advice, and some really heartfelt topics and interesting topics in terms of running and leading organisations and running and leading your own life, in terms of thinking about things in your life in that risk versus opportunity way. And I think we've talked a lot in different lenses around empowerment today. So thank you so much for being on the show, Lisa.
Thank you, Michele. It's been a real privilege to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for now, that's it for today's episode. And thank you to everybody watching and to all of the fabulous fan club and viewers. We really enjoy getting all the different messages about how much you're enjoying the series here on the Mindset Michele TV show. And we really do keep hoping that these tips and suggestions and observations help you to empower you in your own life and to creating that mindset for success. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be wonderful, and be yourself.